Matthew 5:21 to 26. Sermon title is Admit It. Admit it. Matthew 5:21 to 26. Jesus, Sermon on the Mount. You have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. So if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person. Then come and offer your sacrifice to God. When you're on the way to court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to an officer, and you will be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you have paid the last penny. Well, speaking of court, it is finished, finally. It's all done. It's all over. It's complete. You may say, well, what are you talking about, Pastor Chris? What are you talking about? Oh, well, it's been a long time now, and I told you about this story about a year ago, that I listed my old beater snowmobile on Facebook Marketplace, and what happened to it? It got stolen right out of my backyard. Well, the Sanborn police did a wonderful job and wound up catching the guy. I think I told you that. We all knew who it was when we were going through the process here. So they were just waiting for the right moment to be able to do this, to be able to do it with evidence and to prove that it is what it is. And one day, about a year ago, in February, they got him. The dude was out riding the snowmobile in Sanborn. I don't know really the smarts of this is not really up there, but primer black. The whole thing was black, so as to disguise it. Anyway, he was tearing all over town, and anyway, he wound up breaking the thing, and he got stuck out in the trail. But rather than just leaving it there and thinking, gee, I ought to get away from this right now. But he didn't want to do that. He decided to get it out of there. So apparently, he didn't have a vehicle to do so, so he went to Home Depot to rent a truck to get this truck back to the snowmobile and to get it and to haul it away. But meanwhile, some concerned citizen was, worried about the man and saw him struggling with the snowmobile and decided to call the police and say, hey, you might want to go down and help this guy who's stuck with his snowmobile. So, it's a good citizen thing, concerned citizen thing to do. So anyway, he was trying to be neighborly, the citizen, and not knowing the real situation. So the police went and walked down the trail and found the sled, but nobody with it. And then after a while of waiting, here comes the thief trying to pick the snowmobile up, the broken snowmobile. And of course, the police know who this individual is. He's notorious. And so then they put two and two together, like, this person, a snowmobile. Okay, so they wound up putting the person under arrest. Fast forward 1 year. 1 year since then, courts have been slow because of COVID and all that stuff. And we finally have finished pretty much the whole process to do with this situation. He spent a few months in jail at first. He had other offenses too. No really big surprise there. And the sentencing, the final sentencing that happened was 12 months of jail for him, which can be waived for good behavior. So if he behaves in the next 2 years, he won't have to serve any more time. But if he doesn't behave, then he's going to have to go and finish out his 12-year total sentence. And he also has to pay up to $2,000 in restitution. Basically, for expenses that have incurred to me, he has to pay for that. And in restitution, basically, is making good on a previous wrong. That's restitution. We can do that all the time in life. When we do something wrong, to make restitution is to make it good again, is to make it up. So I brought the snowmobile, and it's pathetic looking, really, my snowmobile. It was a beater before, but now it's all flat black, so it looks like, I don't know how you can describe this thing something out of Mad Max Road Warrior, but it looks terrible. So I brought the snowmobile to a repair shop because I have to have a quote on repairing it, as if they could repair it. It's so old. So I asked them to give them a quote, and they're all kind of smiling at it, kind of laughing, but that's okay. And so as they give a quote for repair, because this is what the court told me to do. And so I'll put the quote together with other expenses associated with everything that it had to do. It had to be towed from the site that the police found it to Rusty's Tow Center over there in Telton. And so it's been sitting in Rusty's Tow Center over there for a year in the back over the embankment, just thrown there, like my poor snowmobile. And the guy, I had to pay the tow fee, which is almost as much as I paid for the snowmobile originally. So I'm like, okay, this is getting to be a very, very compounding thing over and over again. So I have to put all these expenses together and submit it to the court, and then he has to pay this, or else he gets in trouble again, which he doesn't want to do. And it's the funny thing. It's all over this piece of junk. I mean, the whole thing, and fines and fees and police and arrests and jail, and over a piece of junk. It's like, boy, oh boy, oh boy. So the lectionary gave this text this week. I'm like, oh, this is kind of convenient because I'm dealing with this right now. So verse 25 of our text today, when you are on the way to court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to an officer, and you will be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you have paid the last penny. So this is the text this week. I'm like, gee, that's interesting that I have to do this right now, and this is the text that's assigned. And, you know, I remember thinking, like a year ago, shortly after the individual stole a snowmobile, I remember thinking that if it just brought it back and apologized, I'd be fine. I mean, I don't really care. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. I really wouldn't have pressed any charges. I would have accepted his apology and sent him on his way and said, you know what, do better next time. It's fine. No harm done, really. We all do stupid things. And, you know, after he did what he did, I did a quick Google search of him and realized that he did a lot of questionable things in his life. But even though, if he were trying to settle it then, before he got caught, if he was trying to make good on it and make restitution at least a little bit before he got caught and before he was forced to do so by the court, if he just would have admitted it, he said, admit it, I would have accepted his effort. And I would have said, we're all good. But as it is, now he's going to have to pay to the last penny all that is associated with this, because the state has been involved and he was prosecuted, and the whole process has to live itself out until the very, very end. And it got me thinking, you know, for all of us, let's be honest, admitting something is very hard. Admitting that we were wrong is very, very difficult. Because so often, I mean, and honestly, admit to yourself right now that this is the way you think. So often when we've done something wrong, we don't think we've done anything wrong. How amazing is that? Well, you know, I didn't think I did anything wrong. For the bad guy that stole my sled, I mean, there's not much he could have said to the police. He was in the possession of a stolen snowmobile, you know, case closed. But a lot of the wrongs that we do are not so cut and dry, are not so provable, if you will. And certainly, they are not so easy to admit. As a matter of fact, it's far easier, and I know none of you ever do this, but it's far easier to blame other people than take responsibility ourselves. Especially when there's no clear-cut evidence that points to us. Then, perfect opportunity to blame somebody else. Take, for example, the first section of our text today, verse 21. You have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. Pretty straightforward, right? I mean, this is a no-brainer. Every culture has punishments for murder. It's universal. It's a universal ethic. And murder produces a dead body. And do you ever listen to those Dateline podcasts or watch Dateline on television? I listened to a few of those recently as I'm driving. Boy, those are scary. I mean, the things that actually go on, the way people think, and the people that go through these crimes and commit these murders, and the primary thing, the response that they have, is that they never, ever want to admit it. And they always want to find some way to blame it on somebody else until all the lies get sifted through and all the evidence pans out and clearly points to the person that actually did it. And the funny thing is, I listen to these Datelines. I haven't listened to too many. I think I've listened to 5 of these podcasts, and the same things are on TV. I think I've listened to 5, and I think 3 of them are involving pastors. I'm like, wow, what is going on? Whoa, pastors involved, but honestly, most everyone in the world, thankfully, is not a murderer. And so it's tempting to say, because of that, I'm not guilty of harming anyone like Jesus is saying right here. He's talking about murder. But then Jesus ups the ante. He makes it a lot more close to home, I guess, and convicts us of something much more deep and much more subtle. Something that we all do on occasion, and something that some people do more than others. What is that thing? We get angry. Who here gets angry? Yeah, everybody's going to raise their hand and get angry. And this is an interesting idea here in the scripture. Verse 22. Jesus goes on, but I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, or the technical term is raka, which means fool, but the New Living also translation calls it idiot. But you get an idea, a very insulting word. If you call someone an idiot, you're in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. So with this statement, Jesus puts everyone back on the hook. And there's no denying that. Of course, you can't murder. That's wrong. We all get that. But Jesus is saying you can't even want to do harm to someone. You can't even wish harm on anyone. But even more so, you can't even curse them or call them a fool or an idiot. That gets you into trouble. But I'm sure that many of us could say that we've never really done any of that before at all. We don't really curse people. We don't really call them fools. And we don't really want to really wish harm on people, really, when it comes down to it. So we would say, well, I guess I'm free and clear. Well, sorry. You can't. I'm not going to let you go there today, because but even beyond that, Jesus says we can't even get angry with someone. And you say, wait a minute. That is impossible, right? That is impossible. If you get angry with someone, you're subject to judgment. All right. Well, there it is. We've all done it. If you're not going to say you haven't been angry at someone, boy, I think you have an issue with lying to yourself right now, because we've all done this. And as I've said, some do this a lot more than others. And all of you hotheads out there are probably shaking in your boots right now, right? Because there's judgment, apparently, that are going to come to those who get angry at other people. Everyone gets angry. And again, anger. It's more of a Catholic idea, and the idea of mortal sin. But the idea is a very familiar one within our culture. And that, the idea is that anger is bad. But then the question comes up, is all anger bad? Is all anger subject to judgment? Some anger, I think, is necessary. Some anger is good. Anger can even be healing, especially if someone has wronged you, especially if you are a victim of something. And if you internalize this and you haven't felt the anger yet, that can be emotionally damaging. And we all know this. This is common knowledge. So I think I need to understand anger better. So I thought, since anger is considered to be a mortal sin, and that's a Catholic idea, I thought that I should go and ask the Catholics what they think about anger. But I didn't go down to St. Joseph's in Belmont because I was kind of sick all week, and I couldn't do that. And I met the priest, though, down there. I think it's probably the same one that's still down there. He's a very nice man. Yeah, he's a nice guy. So I didn't do that, so I went on the internet, the easy way to do things, and I went to aboutcatholics.com, and I wanted to know about what anger is all about. And I asked if anger was a mortal sin. Like, in other words, is anger bad enough that it can bring judgment on us if we have it? And if so, what kind of and level of anger qualifies for this kind of a thing? So many questions, I know. Well, in the dictionary, this is the Catholic website pointed out, in the dictionary, anger is defined as a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. Anger is a feeling of displeasure, something that you can find during times of difficulty and discomfort. But anger is an emotion. Anger is an emotion. And it's important to remember, this is what the website says, the Catholic website says, anger is an emotion, and it's important to remember that emotions are not sins. An emotion is not a sin. And anger is an emotion. Therefore, this is what the website says, feeling an emotion is not sinful. And this was relieving to me because, I've felt anger in the past like everyone else has. And like many of you, I've gone through things in life where I felt betrayed. And anger is a part of that. And anger is also a part of that healing process. And I was scratching my head thinking, so when is anger a sin? So the website goes on. And they said in just aboutcatholics.com, he said, just like other things, we tend to sin when we decide on how to act in certain situations. So anger as an emotion, they said, is normal, not sinful. But anger as an action is something different. So as an emotion, it is just what we do as humans. But anger as an action is something very different. Anger is considered a mortal sin, they said, when it causes you to make harmful decisions. This can pertain to vengeful anger, to uncontrolled anger, and persistent anger. These types of anger are considered sinful according to the website, and I thought it made sense because they're all geared towards harming someone. These types of anger, they say, also tap into hatred, which is a course of sin. And I thought, okay, now we're getting somewhere. So vengeful anger was the first one they mentioned. Basically, vengeful anger is what? To want revenge. To want, harm to be done to whichever person you are angry at. And this, as they say, is a sin, of course. Uncontrolled anger leads to harming others because the anger is not in control. Anger, harming others either emotionally or physically. And that is, of course, a sin, even harming ourselves through the illness that anger can produce, uncontrolled anger. Or worse, that's also a sin. And they also said, according to persistent anger, if you won't let go of your anger, if you refuse to forgive, then that, the website said, is also a sin. So I think it shed some pretty good light on what anger is. So I went back to the Bible, verse 21, started it again after with this newfound knowledge from aboutcatholics.com. Verse 21, you have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. Okay, again, that's easy enough. Anger that leads to the action of murder is sin, period. Easy. Got it. Check. Well, the next one isn't so cut and dry. First part of verse 22. But if you say, but I say if you're even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. Again, does this mean that the feeling of anger is a sin? Well, it can't mean that because anger is an emotion, and emotions are not sins. So I think in order to understand this, you have to take this verse within its context. And it goes on, if you call someone an idiot, you're in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you're in danger of the fire of hell. Both of these examples are actions derived from anger, and they are meant to hurt. They are meant to hurt. Basically, if you call someone an idiot, and if you curse someone, you mean to hurt them. And it's the same process, it's the same functional process as anger leading to murder. It's just not so extreme. It's just much less. But still, nonetheless, it's sinful. So where does this leave all of us? Look, I'm sure no one here has ever cursed at someone, right? Who here has never cursed at someone? Well, or called them some insulting name. So all of us, pretty much, come on, are guilty of something that is going to either bring us before the court, whatever that really means, or send us into the fires of hell. And, well, hell here really is Gehenna, which was the burning trash heap outside the city. It was more metaphorically spoken rather than actually you're going to go to hell if you're angry at someone. So don't get all worried about that, okay? But either way you slice it, bad stuff is going to happen if you do these things. So don't be angry, right? Easy enough, right? No. You can't help it. It's an emotion. You can't help having emotions. It's just who we are. But we cannot let our anger be vengeful, uncontrolled, and persistent, because that causes harm. And therein lies the problem. Jesus said somewhere else, he said, love one another just as I have loved you, right? That's what Jesus is getting at. So how do we deal with anger? This is something we all could learn to deal with better because we all have it, right? First of all, admit it. Admit it. Second, do something about it. Don't let it remain. Well, how do you do something about it? Well, there's the right way to deal with it, and there's the wrong way to deal with it, right? The wrong way to deal with anger is to entertain it by thinking about it over and over again. And letting it sit there and almost being comforted. Did you ever feel that? There's almost a comfort in feeling anger over and over again. I don't know why. It's just kind of how we work sometimes. That's the wrong way to deal with it. Another wrong way to deal with anger is drowning it in a bottle. Don't ever do that. Okay, that's just going to hurt yourself and a lot of other people. And don't ever deal with anger by actively suppressing it and pretending that everything is just rosy. That doesn't work. That's going to cause harm to you and to other people in your lives. So the right way to deal with it is verse 23. Here it is. So if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, whatever that might be, or if someone has done something against you, if you're angry at them, if your anger is remaining and festering, and it's not going away. Verse 24, I mean, this is a really big statement, verse 24. Leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Don't even do it. Why not? Yeah, it's not going to be meaningful. Why go through the motions of worshiping, of laying our lives down to God when we're really not doing it? That's what Jesus is saying. Is that if you want to really worship, the first thing you do is you take care of the relationships in your life. Is you deal with things like anger in our lives. Leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person, which is the heart of our faith right there. Because God was reconciled to us through who? Jesus, right? That is the basis of our belief. Because that's the basis and the core of our belief, that's the core of our life. That's what we do. That's who we are. We're people who have been reconciled, and we are about the business of reconciliation between ourselves and other people, and helping other people to be reconciled to God. And the best way that you can show the love of God to someone is to forgive them. That's the best way to do it. And Jesus says, then, after you've done that, come and offer your sacrifice to God. In other words, don't just pretend it's not there. Don't just rationalize it or feel justified in feeling it, or hold on to it so as to try to get back at that person, because if you hold on to the anger, you feel like you're getting them back. It doesn't work. If anger inside of you is causing you to wish harm on someone, either physical or emotional harm, then that's what we're talking about here. I remember talking to a woman some years ago. None of you here know her. She had been through a divorce, and her husband treated her poorly. And I get that. That was a horrible thing. It was a horrible thing. And it was years after the divorce. But I remember talking to her, and she got this look on her face at one point, talking about her ex-husband. And she said, I want him to have nothing. And I thought, whoa. Look, I understand that there's pain. I understand that there is injustices that were done, and maybe some really, really difficult things. And I'm not saying that your husband is innocent. But what I'm saying is that anger is inside of you. And that is, number one, harming you. Because if that is so powerful inside of you, that is going to just honestly, frankly, rot you out inside. And that's not good. And that's harmful. Jesus says if you have persistent, vengeful, or uncontrolled anger, do something about it right away. Don't even go to church or do anything else first. Admit it. And then right away, go to the person and make amends. Go be reconciled to that person. And it's not only true in the ancient world, but it's true today too. I was reading a story about the Reconciliation Parish in Berlin, Germany. It was a congregation that was divided by the Berlin Wall. Of course, that came down in 1989. And it was then reunited when the wall came down, this parish did. But the removal of the enormous physical barrier did not heal the wounds and the divisions that were in the community's hearts. The work on reconciliation then begun. And so this parish began to host conversations between former members of the East German secret police and their victims. And the pastor named Manfred Fischer, he found that
even the victims of these horrible situations were keen to forgive and willing. But first, there needed to be an honest and an open word, such as, I am sorry. I acted in the wrong way. And thankfully the Cold War is over, hopefully. But there's still coldness in people's hearts that needed to be warmed by acts of honesty and forgiveness. And maybe there's a Cold War going on in your home right now. Maybe there's a Cold War in your family or your old friend, or maybe you're engaged in this lifelong Cold War with someone who's passed away already. The person is long gone, but the anger remains so close by. It's time to reconcile. Do we really want to hurt people? Not really. We just want to be understood and respected. Maybe you're looking for an apology from someone, but you're never going to get it. I understand. I've been there. But understand that unforgiveness and anger hurts you the most. Maybe you're the one that needs to apologize in some situation. And probably, if you're like me, you're so blockheaded you don't even realize it. And you won't let yourself realize. And you ask, all you have to do is ask God to point these things out in your life, and guess what he does? He points them out. But then we always want to rationalize and blame. And no, just admit it. And then leave everything. And go be reconciled to whomever that person is, even if they are no longer with us. You can still do it. Am I angry at the guy who stole my sled? Sure, I was, yeah. He came onto my property, my kids were home. He came onto my property with my kids home and stole something that belonged to me. And he should have gotten more punishment for what he did. But he didn't. So I admit it, I was angry, and perhaps I still am. But what am I going to do with that? Am I going to let it fester, wish harm on him, press for more consequences from the court? No. Anger is an emotion, and if not dealt with properly, it can do lots of harm and sin. I think I'm going to just keep reminding myself that I have been forgiven for so much more than that. God forgave me of much more than a stolen junk sled. God forgave me of everything and for everything. So I too can forgive and re-forgive. Can you stand with me for our final hymn today?